Thanks, guys. So, a bit about us and where we came from first. We actually came from the video games industry way back, doing multiplayer networking and Call of Duty and Guitar Hero and lots of other games for ultimately about 500 million people and got bought out. And then after that, instead of becoming just technology people, we moved into publishing ourselves. The kinds of games we got into were interactive games you play in your browser. And it was around 2010 when we noticed on one of our brands a glaring discrepancy of about 30% of ads going missing somewhere. We were puzzled. We had one crazy theory that we didn't quite believe about what it could be. So we built some JavaScript to detect explicitly for the presence of ad block. And we determined that basically about 1/3 of our players, who admittedly were extremely geeky, had ad block installed at that time. So that was back in 2010. 2 years later, in 2012, we had down tools on all other projects and had decided to just focus on ad blocking. We could see it was a trend that was going to inexorably rise. And as publishers, we were ill-equipped to deal with it. We decided to try to build the tools so that publishers everywhere would have some way to deal with this. So that's 2012. It's over 4 years ago now that we started PageFair. We've been doing this exclusively. We've tried, I think, just about every tactic that's out there. We started off with the analytics tool, which is very widely used these days. We did messaging campaigns at the start on over 200 websites, educational style campaigns, which don't work at all, incidentally. We offered the users a chance to pay. That worked even worse. I think around about 1 year in, we started building what we call the ad block wall, but what's basically a deal-like strategy. So block the user from the website until they cease and desist. We built that solution, and it's still running live on some ComScore top 10 websites, uninterrupted since we launched it. So it's probably the most mature of that kind of solution out there, but we don't really believe in it. Right? I think as a kind of solution, it works for some websites to a certain degree, normally less than 50%, incidentally. For most websites, it doesn't scale. But there's something about it that just strategically fails to address the core problem here of why people are installing ad block in the first place. So a couple of years ago, we shifted our technology efforts away from detecting and blocking users into trying to figure out a way to serve the good ads, the ads that weren't the source of the problem in the first place, in a way that ad block can't interrupt. So that's what we built towards starting a few years ago, and that's what we mainly do today. So for some publishers, we're helping them with deal-like strategies, but we believe the future is going to be about finding those good lean ads and ensuring that they don't end up subjected to unwarranted blocking. Okay, and I'll talk more about that as we move along. First of all, I'm going to share some new data. These reports that we ended up well known for. Some of the methodology in the reports is based on something that I think is pretty unique to us. We figured out a way to map ad blocking in every country in the world, not based on surveys, also not just based on our own analytics network, but looking at the rate at which each ad block plugin basically calls home to the open source ad block servers, which is proportional to the amount of usage. So it's primary data. Here's the most recent chart for the UK. The left-hand side is August 2013. Right-hand side is basically today. There's a few interesting things about this. Obviously, it unfortunately goes up and to the right. But in the middle here, there's an interesting period. So if you see this quite large trough here and look at the preceding 12 months, I think this aligns with what Steve was saying about what's been happening. It looked like ad block was kind of leveling off or perhaps even going down. Some publishers basically measuring on their own websites might have seen this dip. Unfortunately, it's basically, this is August this year, that's August last year, that's August 2014. The first point is August 2013. Every August is a low point. People go on holidays, especially students. That's what that is. So it's already climbing back up as of September and October. Some more interesting things, so that was that August point. This is called the block ellipse. There it is. So this low point is August last year. September, Apple launches content blocking. The media goes into an absolute frenzy. And we have several months of growth in what's primarily desktop ad blocking, by the way, here, but growth that we'd never seen before. So it is interesting. It's mainly desktop ad blocking. Content blocking in the end never really took off. It's growing, but it's still low single-digit percentages. It's not really significant in this picture. So what this is, the only explanation we can think of is people installing AdBlock because they're reading so many stories about AdBlock in the press. That's what happens. But overall, it levels out, and the chart just basically comes back to where it would have been overall. The overall trend is, it appears to be one of general leveling out. Right? It's still growing. The growth appears to be slowing. But I don't think it's as good news as it might first seem, because if you take over the same period and look at desktop usage. So according to statcounter.com, in mid-2013, 84% of web usage in the UK came from desktop. Today, it's more like 64 on average. So this growth of ad blocking, even though it's slowing, has been during a period of decline of desktop. So it's actually quite impressive growth. If we could zoom in and just look at those desktop users, we might actually see that ad blocking is continuing to grow exponentially within that cohort. Which brings us to the next question. Well, what about mobile? What's currently happening on mobile? So what we're seeing is currently in the UK, very little mobile, but if you zoom back out to the world, so here's a heat map. We might put this in the next report. We hadn't done this before. We took mobile and desktop ad blockers and put them together. Obviously, something pops on the map. India and China, for the first time, have a massive amount of ad blocking. It's all mobile. It's mostly all mobile. 300 million active mobile desktop ad block users in those countries, growing at about 100% per year. It's a bit surprising what it actually is. This isn't content blocking. It's not ISP-style blocking. It's not people configuring their routers or proxies or anything like that. It's third-party browsers that you install on your phone that have ad blocking built in. So one of the main functions of the browser is to supply ad blocking as part and parcel of your browsing experience. The biggest one of these is UC Browser. So this is a company, a Chinese company. It's owned by Alibaba. I think as of last month, it became the largest browser in India. So it has more traffic in India than Chrome does. It's growing, like a hockey stick. They seem, as a company, I have no visibility into how they operate internally, but they seem to know what they're doing. They started in China, had massive growth, moved into India, immediately achieved the same kind of growth, moved into Indonesia, same thing, moved into Russia, same thing. So they seem to have a pretty well-polished global expansion strategy. I don't know what their next intentions are, but we have to wonder if they're going to plan to move west. Right? You can install this right now if you like. There's a great English language version of this browser. It's fast. It's pretty efficient. It saves you data on your maybe mobile tower. So it's possible that this could happen. I just don't know when, but I don't see any reason why it isn't going to happen. The product exists. They know what they're doing. They'll ultimately turn their attention to expansion in the West. If not them, then maybe some other browser that's like this, or some other form of ad blocking. So if it's a question of not if, but when, what will that look like? Here's a picture of ad blocking across the world, so far as we can figure it out. The blue line is desktop ad blocking over the last 5 years, roughly. And it has that same leveling off feature. And over the last year, we see mobile ad blocking, primarily third-party browser ad blocking, and within that, primarily UC Browser, shoot up out of nowhere and overtake desktop ad blocking as the main kind of ad blocking from a global perspective. But that mobile ad blocking hasn't really come to the West yet. It's possible that looking back in 2 years' time, we'll see the UK chart looking something like this. So hopefully everyone's sufficiently scared by that. I think, this is mainly to reinforce the point that although desktop ad blocking might look like it's leveling off, it's not time for us to be complacent. Right? This is a real problem. Mobile ad blocking might happen anytime. When it does happen, it'll be fast. And we need to do everything we can to minimize it and defend ourselves. So onto the solutions. So obviously, we think you should listen to the users. Some people think that these users are thieves. I think that they're just simply trying to object to what, in many cases, is actually quite an objectionable experience. First of all, some interesting things about these users. Now, we've noticed along the way, as a cohort, they're 100% human by definition. You don't often find that. Bots don't install AdBlock. Right? Every single one of these people is a real visitor on your website. They tend to be quite attention-rich. We serve ads to ad blockers. The click-through rate is significantly higher. We hear from the advertisers on the other end that the conversion rates are significantly higher. They live in an uncluttered internet. There's no need to shout at them to get their attention. Simple banners and simple ad formats work again, which is interesting. They're exclusive in a sense. Marketers generally can't access this audience online right now, except perhaps with Facebook, interestingly. But as a publisher, if you're surfacing this as a deliberate segment, which you might choose to do over the next few years, you'll have something that advertisers can't easily get anywhere else. Demographically, skew male, skew millennial, and there's evidence that they also skewed to be slightly more educated, probably because AdBlock tends to spread by word of mouth, and colleges would be, ground zero for that. What their complaints are, what's driving them to ad blocking. Steve already covered a whole bunch of this. There's my version. The good news here is that pretty much there's total agreement. Lots of people have been doing surveys. All the surveys agree. Right? There isn't really a debate over the reasons people install AdBlock anymore. And in fact, when you see this list, it seems kind of obvious that these would be the reasons. The number one reason is interruption. Steve touched on popovers, interstitials, ads that interrupt people, ads that autoplay sound. Interestingly, video. What we find, non-skippable pre-roll video is a big culprit. You can actually take a chart of video ad spend, digital video ad spend, and put it next to a chart of the growth of ad blocking, and they parallel each other. Right? So non-skippable video is probably the number one new driver that caused that massive surge in ad blocking from roughly 2013 onwards. Security is a huge issue that users are touching on. Steve mentioned that as well. They unfortunately have very good reason to be concerned. And they have reasons to associate online ads with getting viruses on their computers. And that's kind of unforgivable. We have to figure that one out. Privacy is another fascinating topic. I think we'll get into it maybe on the panel in the next talk. There's two camps of these AdBlock users. Some are sophisticated enough to understand third-party cookies and have a sense of what data leakage is, and wonder who are these 10 to 100 companies that show up in Ghostery that appear to be stealing their data and presumably are reselling them to someone else without their permission. Then there's the less technical user who doesn't understand any of that, but understands that they're being followed around the internet by a retargeted ad and just get creeped out. So this privacy topic is mixed in there. It's not the number one reason ad blockers cite for using AdBlock, but I actually think it might be one of the most important, especially in Europe with the GDPR regulations coming up. Perhaps ad blocking is a proving ground where we can build a better way to do ads that respect privacy. And we need to respect these users. And that could be something that will outlast the regulatory turmoil that we're all about to face with third-party data in 2 years' time. Then there's the obvious ones, page speed and its cousin bandwidth. Bandwidth, interestingly, is really a mobile thing, especially in the developing world where every megabyte can actually cost quite a bit. Let's say, so those are the problems. Next, that we need to fix them. Steve touched on this. Our message, our belief is we have lean. We just got to embrace lean. We have to do that, otherwise there's no point. I think there's actually ways to go even further, right? So with each of our individual capabilities, we should try to make the most conservative interpretation of lean we can. From our point of view, we think we can go further on security and on privacy when we serve ads. Let's say you've got some of these ads already. You've listened to the users. You've identified, maybe you've switched to lean, or maybe you've got some lean ads, or ads that you are confident, and we're all confident, were not the reason that people installed AdBlock in the first place. What's the next move? Well, we think you are 100% within your rights to just go ahead and serve those ads that weren't the source of the problem in the first place. And more people are doing this. We're doing it with dozens of publishers. Once it's installed, it's a fire and forget kind of thing, and the revenue comes back. Every single one of those users that previously weren't monetizing are monetizing again. Right, so it becomes actually an opportunity in a sense. And ad blocking ends up in the rearview mirror for those publishers. We're not alone having come to this conclusion, though. I think most people would be familiar that Facebook, in the middle of August, came to the same conclusion. They've made some modifications to their ads to improve user choice, user feedback controls, and then they made an announcement that they were going to start defending those ads from being blocked in an unwarranted fashion by AdBlock. That was around, I think, August 9th. And already, I think it was 100% working by August 18th. So we're basically halfway through Q3 from their perspective. Last week, they announced on their earnings call that even though they deployed that just halfway through the quarter, they'd already seen a solid 9% uplift in revenue for the entire quarter. So projecting that forward, that's going to be a lot of money. My rough calculation, by compiling various sources, is I would expect them to make an extra $700 million off Facebook.com from desktop users over the next 12 months because they did that. So they turned it into an opportunity. It's not just Facebook. Twitch announced last week, so Twitch, the Amazon subsidiary, esports streaming company, announced that they were going to start defending their video ads from being ad blocked as well. And I think this is basically where we're all going to end up. We might have to try educational campaigns, we might have to try blocking the users, but ultimately, basically listening to users, respecting what they're saying, and just serving those ads is the only thing that's going to scale and 100% work for all of us as we move along. So, quick, just to clear up how this would work practically. This is how it works for us. It's probably quite similar with our competitors, and we have a few now. You have your existing ad server. You continue to do what you're doing with your regular audience. That's the left-hand side of the chart. With a company like us, we detect when it's an ad block user on the website, and we serve the ad differently. We serve it through our channel, which is secure from ad blocking, can't be tampered with, can't even be seen by ad block. And from our servers then, we make the ad call into your ad server. We work with your existing ad stack. So basically, your direct campaigns get served again, your programmatic partners begin to work again. We do that in cooperation with those programmatic partners to make sure that all of the counting works correctly and all of the money gets made. So that's that. I would try to think about what I would do if I was, I suppose, the AOP, like embodied in one person. And I was thinking that, well, ultimately, we're all going to get down to embracing lean and then defending those good ads from being blocked by companies that might be in an extortion racket. And since you're going to end up there, I think you should just go for it, perhaps as a consortium. There's definitely a communication issue that needs to be addressed here. If you do this like Facebook, you stand up, you say you listen to the users, make sure you fix the ads, make it clear that you fix the ads, and then say, however, you're now going to defend yourself from unwarranted blocking. So this is what we now call the strategy: listen, fix, serve. I think that's what you guys should do, and you'd benefit from doing it together. And we're happy to help. I'm sure there's several other companies that would as well. Thank you.